Another one here, which is also interesting to see, is the timing. So here's 3 parameters. Vario integration. Usually I have this set, the default setting is 10 seconds, and this is probably the best setting you could use. You can change it to your liking. But the idea is, if you're getting into a thermal, the integrated Vario, it's basically taking the average of the last 10 seconds. Okay? If I get, let's say, a +5 when I go into thermal, and then I get a 1, and then I get a -1, then I get a 4. My thermal is not a +5, it's not a 4, it's maybe a 2. Okay? Maybe I go into a thermal where I get a 2.5, but it's constant 2.5, so I get a constant 2.5. So this is the averager of the Vario. Okay? 10 seconds is usually the time it takes to do about half a turn inside a thermal. So it's a fair value to give you a good average of your thermal status. Okay? You can set it to whatever you like. Track interval is the number of points, so how often it records a point in your track. Default is set to 1. It has enough memory for about 180,000 track points, so there's no reason to reduce this time. Having a 1 second interval has the advantage that you have, when you download the flight later, you see the thermal, in perfect circles and not one spot, one spot, one spot, one spot. It'll draw the thermal properly. Even if you have a higher value, let's say you make the track interval, say 10 seconds, and you're flying in a place where you need to go into a turn point, a competition, the moment you go into the turn point, no matter what the setting was, the moment you cross over, it records a point. So it'll override whatever was set. Okay, so you can set it at a higher value if you want, and to cross the point. And then the other one is the UTC-Offset. So yeah, in Germany at the moment, our UTC-Offset is 2 hours. I've got it incorrect at 0, but it should be 2 hours.
Just one reason to set to a higher value than 1 second. It's for the optimization on a cluster.
Maybe somebody wants to have...
Because the processing load for optimizing a track load is 1 second.
Nowadays with the processing power, it doesn't really take too long. It's a question of choice. Maybe people want to have, with 180,000 track points, you have about 56 hours worth of flights, or 50 hours if we count with the overhead and so on, of flight that you can record. If you increase this, you can go up to 500 hours. Let's say you put a 10-second interval. So you could have 500 hours worth of flights inside the instrument.
When you upload to an online contest, the optimization?
It might take a little bit longer, yeah. Although the processing power nowadays, I've used always 1 second, and it's very quick. In fact, with the live, you can do a very interesting thing, which is upload directly from the instrument. So, it's basically ready to go. It's just push a button, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Okay. So UTC interval is just the time offset. Okay, this one is an important bit, and some people get confused with this one. So, the thresholds. This is the Vario stuff. So it's all related to the acoustics of the Vario. The climb threshold, it's not the sync, which is the first. The sync threshold is the meter per second that you are syncing when you start to hear that constant syncing sound. Okay, so that's the climb sound. That's, if you hear the sound, maybe you start thinking of getting the hell out of it, because you may be underneath a Nimbus cloud. That's a +13. Okay. 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 The sync sound is this sound. Okay. Right. So, the idea of setting this thing to -2 is that this is the way I fly. I usually consider that if my glider, when I hit the speed bar, is doing a sync of -2, I don't want to know that the air around me is okay, it's stable. If I'm going down at -2, anything more than a -2, I'm in sync. So I want to know about the sync. That's why I set it to -2. Some people don't want to hear the sync sound, so just set it to a very high value. So keep it, as I said, it's a choice. The climb threshold is the point at which it does that first beep. So the first beep, that's at 0.1. Also, I wouldn't change it. Recommend to keep it the same. Sync alarm is where people get confused because they confuse sync alarm with sync threshold. The sync alarm I don't use, but some people might want to use it to decide maybe it's time to throw the reserve because you're going down at -15 or something. Okay. So it's the sound of the sync alarm is a siren. So it's like the police sound. Okay.
I have a question. Many people come to me and say I want to buy a new instrument, but it can only be of this or that company because I got used to the sound of this company or that company, and the new instrument must have the same sync and sound like before. Can you change it?
You can change it. There's some peculiarities about it. What you can change here, you can change the initial frequency of the beep. So when you look at those 700 hertz, that's the first beep sound. Okay, maybe I can. Let me try something here. No, that could involve having to break here for a second. Okay, you can change the initial beep sound. So if it's higher or lower, and then between each tenth of a meter per second, you have an increment in the frequency, so it gets higher and higher and higher, the pitch.
So I can more or less imitate other instruments?
You can imitate, yeah. And you can change, there's another one which is the cadence, which allows you to set two different types of ramps of cadence. So the cadence is the beep speed, okay? You can have one which starts slow and then picks up very quickly, or you can have one which kind of is more gradual, so more linear, okay? So it's one which is more exponential and another one is more in a straight line. Okay, so it's the two different types. We're probably still going to improve on this. I've been asked some questions of actually getting this even better, where you would be able to configure this on the computer and then upload the formulas onto the system. So we're constantly improving firmware. So this is something that in the future
they can do this on all your instruments.
On all the instruments. Okay, so all of them have got this thing here. Another one is the. I'm not sure if it's on this one, it's in the advanced one. There's another section here which also changes some stuff about the Vario. We'll go there in a second, which is the advanced features. Okay, so I think you all understood the difference between sync threshold and sync alarm. Okay, sync alarm, generally it's an alarm, it's a siren. It's very annoying. You just leave it at 0 unless you want to know, like maybe -15, that it's time to throw the reserve. Okay.
Time to think about the situation.
Exactly. I'm going to jump straight down to the advanced features. I've skipped one here because this is still related to the Vario. Okay. There's one value here which is called the damper. Obviously, a lot of these things I'm using the English menus, otherwise I wouldn't be able to read them.
How many languages do you have in your instruments?
Oh, about 7 or 8, I think, at the moment.
Okay. So also German.
Also German. Maybe the German might not be absolutely 100% correct. If you find an error, please let us know. We'll correct it because my German is not too hot. I know a few words. Anyhow, so the damper is on the beep. If you lower the damper, it's like a shock absorber. Okay, so it affects the whole Vario. So if the Vario is going up and it goes beep 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 and stops. If it's got a higher beep, a higher damper value, it'll start to beep slower, and then when it gets to the top, it'll beep, 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 beep. It'll still beep maybe once or twice when you stop, because it's got a damping effect. Okay. Usually you shouldn't change this value. 6 is a pretty sensitive one. If you lower it, it becomes more sensitive, it becomes more nervous. Okay. If you make a higher value, it becomes softer. Okay. So damper at 6 is a decent value. This is the cadence, is the one that allows you to change the speed of the beep I was telling you about. Another one is the dynamic frequency. Dynamic frequency is the following. When there's a first beep, it can either beep constant, so like one beep always at the same tone. If you put a dynamic, while it's beeping, if you gain in altitude, it will gain in frequency. So you'll hear like beep, okay, instead of like a flat beep. Okay, so it's also a question of how you like it. I like the dynamic frequency. It sounds quite nice. You can actually tell that when you're at a certain rate that you're still going faster. Okay. Another one is the buzzer. Now this buzzer one, this value 3 actually means 0.3 meters per second. Okay. And the objective of the buzzer, let me switch the Vario sound on here. I'm going to get this thing off. Oh wait, let me use a different one.
Vielleicht nutze ich die Pause und frage, ob es auf Deutsch Zwischenfragen gibt, weil es im Englischen irgendwas nicht so ganz verstanden wurde. Alle Englisch konform.
Okay, so all this racket that you're hearing here, a lot of people don't like this sound. Okay? This is the buzzer. Okay? So the idea behind the buzzer is the following. When we are flying and we are coming down at only, let's say, minus 0.2 meters per second, in fact we are inside a thermal already, because the glider in its own would be sinking at -1. Right? So a 0.2 or a 0.3 negative value is already a thermal. Okay? So what we do is we take the climb threshold, which if you remember was 0.1, and we minus 0.3. So in this case, at minus 0.2, that's what buzzer 3 does, you start to hear this sound. So that's the beep. Okay, that sound. Okay. When it gets to 1/10 of a meter per second below, so in this case when it gets to 0 and starts to go to 0.1, you hear this like, okay. So if you switch off the buzzer, if you don't like the sound, I recommend that you fly with it. But if you don't want this,
okay.
So if you
just they asked if I can explain in German.
Okay.
Der Buzzer bedeutet, dass selbst wenn ihr schon wenn ihr eigentlich mit 0,2 oder 0,3 Meter pro Sekunde sinkt, sagt er, seid ihr schon in einer Thermik, weil der Gleitschirm ein höheres Eigensinken hat. Das heißt, er fängt dann schon an, diesen Buzzerton zu zeigen. Man kann einstellen, wann das anspringt, sodass ihr selbst bei leichtem Sinken schon diesen Ton bekommt. Und sobald er über die Grenze von 0, also sobald ihr dann echtes Steigen habt, fängt er an zu piepsen. Der sagt aber, das war ein Grund, warum die Leute dieses Vario nicht kaufen wollten, weil, wenn man das anschaltet im Geschäft, fängt es an, diese unfassbar nervigen Geräusche zu machen. Und das hat jeder sofort wieder ausgemacht und weggelegt. Deshalb, man kann diesen Buzzer ausschalten, weil er im Geschäft und daheim wahnsinnig nervt. Und man kann ihn aber in der Luft einschalten, weil er euch eben sagt, dass ihr schon in einem Steigen drin seid, in einer hebenden Luft, obwohl ihr gerade sinkt. Und das kann kein anderes Vario. Die anderen Varios können euch höchstens diesen Nullschieber anzeigen und fangen dann an, diese Geräusche des Nullschiebers zu machen. Aber die sagen nicht, ihr seid jetzt zwar mit minus 0,2 Meter pro Sekunde unterwegs, das ist aber schon eine aufsteigende Luft, such hier weiter. Das ist die Funktion, die er erklärt hat. Und er sagt, 1/10 von einem Meter, also 0,1 Meter pro Sekunde sinken, bedeutet Buzzer 1. Das heißt, Buzzer 3 bedeutet, er meldet sich ab 0,3 Meter sinken mit dem Buzzerton.
Yeah.
I hope I explained it right, otherwise no one would notice it.
Okay, I think you understood it. So,
ist das so?
Jetzt habe ich es auch kapiert.
Jetzt hast du es auch kapiert.
Right, because of this noise that this thing makes when you're on the ground, because on the ground we had 0, right? So we had takeoff, waiting to take off, and it's constantly going bzzz, and that's not very nice. We have the auto silent function. Okay, so auto silent will keep the Vario switched off until it detects takeoff. So that's that option on.
How does it detect the takeoff?
It detects takeoff by speed in this case. So if you see start speed, it says,
Yeah.
start speed 8 kilometers per hour. That means when I exceed on average, not peak, it's on average, 8 kilometers per hour, I have the start flight. Okay. When the flight starts, it starts to record the flight and the Vario goes on. Okay. And that's why when we switch on the Vario and the sound has been switched off, it warns you, because otherwise you wouldn't know.
Okay.
And the normal Vario had also the same features.
The normal Vario also has the same features. The way it does it is it detects a change in 5 meters. So if 5 meters
Altitude.
change altitude, it starts the Vario.